welcome back to another episode of Jason's Game Room, the only podcast here on YouTube that talks about everything gaming, from board games to dice games to CCGs to video games. If it has anything at all to do with gaming, it is going to be on this show and talked about, so you're going to want to keep tuning in to see what's next. Now, today's episode features a different kind of game that reached some prominence in the mid-1990s. It was a huge fad that happened for a few years before fizzling out. And if you're my age, so early 40s or even a bit younger, you probably played it. And your grandfathers and grandparents might have played it, because in the early 1920s to 1940s it was played as a simplistic game called milk caps. And these were the caps found on the interior lids of milk bottles. They had staples in them at the time, and they stacked kind of weirdly, and the players would use another milk cap to hit them and flip them over. The object being to flip as many over per turn as possible to win the game. Now, if you can see where this is going, that game went away for a long time until it exploded back onto the scene in 1993 as what we know today as POG. And as someone who did have a lot of POG, because it was probably one of the most cost-effective ways of gaming you could get into. You could go buy a package of POGs from a drugstore or a dollar store for cheap. And in some cases, they would come with the plastic or the metal slammer, which would be even more advantageous to playing the game, because it would give you, using the metal slammer was kind of cheating. So a lot of people that played it, a lot of kids would restrict it to the plastic and rubber slammers. But hell, it was a good time. And I remember they had these little plastic containers that looked like giant vials, and I might have had 2 or 3 of those filled with POGs at the time, because as I said, they were cheap. So my grandfather would buy me a couple packages here and there. I'd pick up some with my allowance, and my collection would grow. You'd have Poison POGs with the skull and the death theme on them. You'd have Marvel and DC POGs with superheroes on them. There were just all kinds of different POGs for different people. And this wasn't just a boy thing. Girls played POG too, because they had like butterfly and animal POGs and unicorns. And I remember at the time when it was big, this is just before I hit my teenage years, I was in grade 8. And a lot of people at school played POG, and we'd do this at recess. And my best friend at the time and we would play at his house, not for keeps though, because in our minds we would practice so that when we did play people for keeps, we'd hopefully win and get more. But POG was a huge deal, and I never understood how it got so big so quickly, but then within 2 to 3 years at the most, it died back out. Like, POG was huge. There were a lot of fads of the 1990s that were like that came and went really, really fast. Devil Sticks being another one, but that's not really gaming when you think of it. That's a completely different thing. But as for POGs, it seemed as if that POG would be here to stay at the time because of its popularity and the fact that anybody could buy it. And it was really inexpensive. But lo and behold, even though it came out in early 1993, by 1995, not many people were playing it. There was World POG Championships and local POG Championships, and I remember hearing about a couple local POG tournaments. I never went to them, because at that time, mid-1990s now, I was starting to get into CCGs, and that was a big thing for me. But POG just kind of disappeared, and I remember in 1996, this is about 6-7 months now after the POG fad had just kind of all of a sudden gone, we had a garage sale at my house where I lived at the time, and I sold all my POGs at that garage sale just in one shot. And POGs were one of those collections where it didn't take you as long to accumulate them. But just like that, a lot of people sold them and got out of it, and that was pretty much the end of POG, because you could only go so far with something that is basically milk caps with artwork on them. And As fun as POG was, it did get a little dry after several games because it was not just repetitive, but in some cases, if you played against other kids that would constantly use the same slammer and keep winning, it kind of got boring because you'd lose a lot of your good POGs trying to play the same kid and beat him. But, if he had a metal slammer and you had a rubber or plastic slammer that wasn't doing the same thing, well, it never ended very well for you. And it was a shame that the POG fad died quickly because I would have kept buying them to a certain extent, not so much to play, but to collect the different POGs and the different artworks, because there was some really cool looking POG out there. And especially the ones I had a lot of, which was the Poison POGs, which had the skull and Halloween type graphics and insects like scorpions and spiders, and some of them had like the foil wrapping on them, which made them really shiny. Like, those were pretty cool. That was kind of a thing to behold. You didn't even want to kind of slam them or damage them. You just wanted to look at them. And there were times between playing POG where I'd just take them out of the case, the vials, and look at them and go, wow, that's actually pretty cool, even though they're just milk caps with printed pictures on them. I'm interested to know if anybody out there who listens to this show played POG as well. Mind you, it was not for everybody, and because it was such a short fad, I don't know a lot of people that kept playing. I don't know anybody that kept playing after 1995. I know me and my group of friends at the time, we all pretty much got rid of our POGs and stopped playing at the same time. As I said, in 1995, I was already getting into the CCG phase, and which I continue to do today, but CCGs were huge in the mid to late 1990s, so everything else kind of became secondary at that point, and unfortunately that included POGs. I would think that if POGs would have come out maybe 2 years earlier, they would have lasted longer, because the CCG craze started in 1993, and that's when POGs came out. If they would have came out, say, 1991, I would have seen them going further or being even more popular. But it's hard for something to keep going when it comes out at the same time as another blockbuster hobby or toy or whatnot. So it's understandable that POGs died so quickly. One of the other cool things about playing POG was you could also pick up a playmat, either made out of plastic or rubber, and you could play on the playmat. I had a POG playmat, a rubber one that I picked up at a dollar store that was really neat, and it even had the POG logo on it. I don't know how they sold it so cheap at the time, but that kind of made the game more fun, and you'd play it on top of a table or on the floor or whatever. But being 13 in 1993 and being a kid from the 80s, it was more fun to sit in the dirt and play on a slab of concrete stone or something, or just sit on your driveway and get dirty playing it, because that was the way to go. Everybody did that back then. We were not afraid of getting dirty. And more than anything, POG was one of those games where you could play pretty much anywhere. So you could sit on the grass, pavement, dirt, table, wherever you wanted on your deck. Although it was a bitch to play on the deck at the back of the house because of the slats between the boards. You'd lose a couple POGs that way. So the driveway was preferable. The ups, the downs, and the downright dirty. Actually, that's the highs, the lows, and the downright dirty. I haven't done it in a while, so I'm not thinking properly. The highs of POG were simple. It was an easy and cheap game to get into. Anybody could play. You didn't have to have a lot of money. And I think that's why it became such a big fad, is because it was affordable, unlike a lot of different fads and games that came after it. The lows would have to be, because you're playing for keeps, unless you have a really good friend you're playing with and you just practice around, you would lose a lot of your best POGs very quickly. Especially if somebody had that really expensive slammer. And you'd be angry, and you'd have to go get more, or occasionally trade to get a few back. There's really no downright dirty for POG. As I've mentioned already on the show, it was a good all-around inexpensive game, so it's hard to knock it. The only downright dirty that I can think of is that it was in and out too quickly. But then again, it was a fad, so it's to be expected, so I can't really even classify that as a downright dirty. Anyways, that's all I have today. If you did play POG and have some interesting stories about POG, please leave it in the comments below, and I will respond to you. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and of course, game on!